Shri Jairam Ramesh.
Mr. Chairman, sir. Sir, I rise to oppose the Wildlife Amendment Bill 2021 in its present form. Before I speak, let me say how delighted I am. As rare is wildlife, rare is to see the chairman on the chair in the afternoon at 2:30. And sir, it's my privilege that I'm speaking in your presence, with no disrespect to the deputy chairman who is sitting in front of me. Sir, before I speak on the bill, my colleague Kumar Ketka drew attention to the fact that we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Wildlife Protection Act. The Wildlife Protection Act was discussed in the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha in August of 1972 and was gazetted on the 9th of September 1972. It's an important landmark because this act was passed by Parliament when wildlife was in the state list of the Constitution. The first government made an effort under Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru and K.M. Munshi to pass a Wildlife Act. They could not pass it because the states objected to it, because wildlife was part of the states list. This matter came up when Indira Gandhi became Prime Minister. She was a very ardent conservationist, and she found a way to pass an act by Parliament on a subject belonging to the state list. She resorted to Article 252, which empowers Parliament to pass a law on a state list, provided two or more states assent to it. So on the 12th of April 1972, she wrote a letter to all the chief ministers, and I wish to quote this letter because it's very relevant to our discussion today. She writes, "Dear Chief Minister, I have written to you in the past about wildlife conservation and management. Although there is now greater consciousness about this problem than a few years ago, we have not been able to significantly arrest the continuing decline of our fauna, including many endangered species. Poaching is on the increase, and we continue to receive reports of lucrative trade in furs and pelts of even those animals like the tiger, whose shooting is in law prohibited throughout the country. My colleague, the Agriculture Minister, Mr. Jagjeevan Ram then, has already written to you about the difficulties of controlling trade and taxidermy in the absence of a uniform central law applicable to the entire country. Experts are unanimous that only an integrated and country-wide policy of wildlife conservation and management can arrest the present precipitous decline. It is for these reasons that we now seek your cooperation to enact central legislation on wildlife conservation and management. This is not a political issue. It concerns the survival of our famous natural heritage. Past experience reveals the limitations of a regional approach. The center and states must now act in concert on the basis of a common legislation which should be strictly enforced." So following this letter and following the Parliament passing this law, 11 states enacted their own laws in consonance with Parliament's law, and subsequently all states began adopting this national legislation. The Wildlife Protection Act is one of the most successful acts in our country. It has protected the lions, it has protected tigers, it has protected elephants, it has protected gharials, it has protected rhinoceros, it has protected olive ridley turtles off the coast of Orissa. It's in fact even protected pygmy hogs. Mr. Bhubaneswar Kalita will, perhaps one of the few members of the House who will know what a pygmy hog is, because it is found in the Manas and the Kaziranga sanctuary in Assam. Small little animals. Even that came under the Wildlife Protection Act. And it has protected a large number of birds and a large number of species. So we celebrate the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. It was a courageous and visionary move on the part of a Prime Minister to bring this law at a time when it was not fashionable to talk about environment, climate change, biodiversity, and so on. So let me now come to the bill. Mr. Bhupinder Yadav has been chairman of many standing committees. He has been chairman of many select committees. And I can tell you the batting average that he has of his recommendations being accepted by the government in power is over 90%. Over 90% of the recommendations made by any Bhupinder Yadav chaired committee is over 90%. Whether he sat here or whether he sat there. But today, I have to give him only 50%. It's ironic that a minister whose recommendations are accepted is refusing to accept the important recommendations of the standing committee, which my colleague Sushmita Dev has pointed out. So let me first give him the two credits where it is due. He has accepted the recommendation of the standing committee on Schedules 1, Schedule 2, and Schedule 3. He has cleaned it up. He has followed the format suggested by the standing committee. He has not made one spelling change in the Schedules 1 and Schedule 2 and Schedule 3. And he has, I think, been bold enough to accept that the standing committee has made an improvement on the original bill, and I compliment him for that. Secondly, I wish to compliment him on dropping the most dangerous provision in the original bill. This was the most dangerous provision. This was clause 27, which reads as follows. In section 43 of the Principal Act, after subsection 3, the following subsection shall be inserted, namely, 4. This section shall not apply to the transfer or transport of any live elephant by a person having a certificate of ownership when such person has obtained prior permission from the state government on fulfillment of such conditions as may be prescribed by the central government. He has dropped this in consonance with the recommendations of the standing committee. So far, he's got 2 out of 2. Now comes the problematic part. He has accepted the standing committee's recommendation on redrafting this clause 27. And I, sir, have to point out here, there's a conflict of interest. I was chairman of the standing committee. I hope you will permit me to say this. The elephant is a natural, not only a natural, but is also a national heritage mammal of India. And we know the cultural and religious significance of the elephant in many states of India. And that is why the standing committee had recommended an alternative, provided that the transport or transfer of a captive elephant for a religious, the standing committee accepted the religious significance of the elephant. But what does Mr. Bhupinder Yadav do in the bill? Mr. Bhupinder Yadav adds, or any other purpose. What is this any other purpose? To provide for an elephant for a captive zoo in Gujarat? To provide for some private amusement parks in some other state? What is this any other purpose? So I requested him, please drop any other purpose. Keep, in fact, I suggested to him, say religious and cultural purposes. But he did not agree. And he has kept any other purpose. I would request him, sir.
Secular credentials.
Sir, I have moved amendments. I moved amendments to the bill on the 3rd of August. But these amendments I cannot move today. Yes. The Rajya Sabha is a continuing house. The amendments should be continuing. The bills are continuing. But now, today I am told, these amendments are infructuous because they have not been moved 48 hours before the bill. Yes. I have moved these amendments. Anyway, I don't want to get into this procedural issue. So I want to request the minister, please drop any other purpose. If you have any other purpose in mind, put it into the act. Take the House into confidence. put it into the act and don't get up and say, rules mein aayega, because we know what happens in the rules. So please put it into the act. So I'll take 2 minutes more. So far his score is 2.5. 2 plus, and the third recommendation he's accepted half, and he's diluted it by putting any other purpose. So State Board on Wildlife. I moved an amendment. What the minister has done in the bill, he has made the State Board on Wildlife a rubber stamp machine. Today the State Board on Wildlife is chaired by the Chief Minister. At least the Chief Minister twice a year pays attention to the problems of wildlife. In the case of Mr. Naveen Patnaik, it's more frequent because he takes great interest in the protection of wildlife in Odisha. Now, this bill says you can have a standing committee chaired by the minister, who will be the vice chairman, and you will have 10 members, and we know, sir, these 10 members will be Secretary Forest, Secretary Environment, Secretary Finance, Secretary Culture. They'll all be people who will say yes. So please preserve the integrity and independence of the State Board on Wildlife and bring some institutional members, bring some scientists, bring some conservationists, bring some outsiders who will give you a different point of view. You want to protect diversity, biodiversity, protect biodiversity of intellectual opinion. You cannot have only one person deciding on the State Board on Wildlife. Finally, sir, my friend and colleague Shushmita Dev has referred to this. I do not object to the fact that this bill came because of the need to fulfill CITES commitments. The third assembly of CITES was held in India in 1981. There was no dhoom dham, no tamasha that CITES is coming to India. CITES came to India in 1981. 150 countries met here. India is a world leader in conservation. We don't have to learn lessons from any other country. We are #1 in the world on conservation because of the Wildlife Protection Act. Now, what Mr. Bhupinder Yadav has done in this bill, he has produced a tome of a bill, which is impossible to navigate, impossible to understand. It was a very simple solution that the Standing Committee had suggested, that was agreed to initially, but then for some reason that agreement was taken back and we have gone back into a very cumbersome bill. So, sir, I cannot support the bill in its present form. I support the 2 points on which Mr. Bhupinder Yadav has agreed to the report of the Standing Committee. I compliment him on this, but compared to his average of 90% when he is chairman, I'm afraid as far as this Standing Committee is concerned, his acceptance rate is only 50%. Thank you, sir.
Honorable members, before I call the next speaker, 2 things. One, and we'll see